She said it always began with the smell, a sharp, rotting odor that seemed to pour out of the walls, sour and electric, like burning wires and spoiled meat. The air in the small Los Angeles bedroom would thicken, pressing down on her chest until breathing felt like drowning. Then the room would grow cold, unnaturally cold for California, as if every bit of warmth had been vacuumed out and replaced with something. Watching Doris Bither would lie there, frozen, knowing exactly what came next, invisible hands gripping her wrists. Fingers she could not see but could feel digging into her skin. The weight of a body on the mattress, then another, and another. She said she could hear them grunting, feel breath against her ear, but there was nothing in the room except darkness, her own screams, and the thin apartment walls. Years later, a team of parapsychologists would walk into that same house with cameras, infrared film, and measuring equipment. According to their reports, what they witnessed there would become one of the most disturbing and controversial cases in modern paranormal history. It was the early 1970s in Culver City, a working-class area of Los Angeles. The house at 11547 Braddock Drive was small, worn, and cluttered, a rundown rental crowded with secondhand furniture and 4 children. According to accounts from parapsychologist Dr. Barry Taff, it was here in 1974 that he and his colleague Carrie Gaynor were pulled into a case that would haunt them for decades. At the time, Taff was working at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute's parapsychology laboratory, one of the few places where reports of hauntings were investigated with any attempt at scientific rigor. Bither had heard about the lab from a conversation overheard in a bookstore. Desperate, she approached Taff and Gaynor, telling them that something in her home was not just haunting her. It was attacking her. Doris was a single mother in her 30s, described in later interviews as struggling with alcoholism, unstable relationships, and a traumatic past. Reports suggest she had grown up in an abusive household and had endured violence long before anything supernatural was mentioned. To skeptics, those details would later become crucial. To Taff and Gaynor, they painted a picture of a woman already on the edge, now claiming that something unseen was tearing her life apart. When the investigators first arrived, the house itself felt oppressive. Walls stained with age, dim lighting, a constant sense of overcrowding. The children, according to Taff, seemed anxious and sleep-deprived. Neighbors later told journalists they had heard shouting, banging, and strange noises at all hours, long before any researchers showed up with notebooks and cameras. Whatever was happening inside that house, it had already been going on for years. From the very beginning, Doris's account was different from the usual ghost story. She did not speak about distant footsteps or harmless shadows. She told Taff that 3 entities came to her, often at night, but sometimes in broad daylight. One, she said, was large and powerful. The other 2 were smaller, holding her down, while the larger one sexually assaulted her. She reported bruises, bite marks, and injuries that she claimed had no ordinary explanation. Taff was not a believer by default. His work involved cataloging reports, measuring environmental factors, and trying to rule out fraud, suggestion, or mental illness. Yet he agreed to visit the house. On their first night there, according to his later book, he and Gaynor found Doris agitated, the children tense, and the atmosphere heavy. They did not witness an attack, but they did record loud knocks, unexplained cold spots, and objects that seemed to move without anyone touching them. In the weeks that followed, the team made repeated visits. They brought along other observers, students, technicians, even a few skeptical friends, to see whether anything unusual could be verified by multiple witnesses. According to several accounts, luminous shapes began to appear in the darkened rooms, arcs of light, strobing points, and mist-like forms that seemed to gather around Doris herself. Sometimes these lights were seen by more than a dozen people at once. They decided to document everything they could. Cameras were set up throughout the house, including high-speed still cameras loaded with infrared and high-speed film. On one of the most famous nights of the investigation, Doris was asked to sit on her bed while the lights were turned off. The room was crowded with observers. According to Taff and others present, the temperature dropped sharply. A greenish arc of light appeared above her and then seemed to bend, almost as if outlining an invisible body pressing down. Some of the photographs taken that night have since been published in books and documentaries. In a few frames, white, rod-like streaks of light appear, sometimes curving over Doris's body on the bed. Skeptics argue that these could be the result of camera straps, reflections, or accidental light leaks. Taff maintained that precautions had been taken to prevent such errors, and that in person, the luminous phenomena looked nothing like simple lens artifacts. Reports also describe violent noises. Thunderous crashes from empty rooms, pounding on walls and ceilings, and objects hurled across the air. On at least one occasion, witnesses said they saw Doris shoved by an unseen force. Her teenage son later told interviewers that he had been scratched and pushed as well. The younger children, according to some accounts, claimed to see a man-like figure moving through the house, though nothing showed up when the lights were turned on. The investigators interviewed neighbors and former residents. According to Taff, some said that odd occurrences had been reported in the house even before Doris moved in. Unexplained noises, strange presences, a constant feeling of being watched. Others, however, blamed the disturbances on domestic conflict and alcohol. The line between psychological trauma and the paranormal grew thinner with every news statement collected. Taff and his team tried to approach the case systematically. They measured electromagnetic fields, temperature fluctuations, and attempted to correlate Doris's emotional state with the intensity of the phenomena. They found unusually high ambient electromagnetic readings in parts of the house, though not high enough to cause known physical harm. Still, the data suggested that the environment was anything but ordinary. As the weeks went on, Doris grew more unstable. According to Taff's later recollections, she drank heavily, argued with her children, and reacted with rage when told to calm down for the sake of the experiments. At one point, she was encouraged to verbally provoke the entities in hopes of triggering activity while equipment was running. Witnesses say that when she did, lights burst into view, objects rattled, and a heavy cupboard reportedly slid several inches across the floor. One of the climactic nights of the investigation took place in the small bedroom where Doris said most of the attacks occurred. The team packed into the space, cables snaking across the floor, cameras aimed at the bed from several angles. The overhead light was turned off, leaving only the faint glow from equipment indicators. Low, tense drone. Doris sat on the mattress, shoulders hunched, breathing hard. She had been drinking, according to witnesses, but she was also visibly terrified. Minutes passed in near silence. Pause. Then, several observers later claimed, something seemed to press the mattress downward beside her. Doris cried out that they were there. According to Taff, a glowing mass formed above her torso, captured as streaks and blurs on film. People in the room reported feeling a sudden pressure in their ears, as if the air itself had thickened. Doris screamed that she was being held down, though no one could see hands or bodies on the bed. Despite the dramatic displays, the case did not end with a final revelation or neat solution. Funding and patience ran out. The investigators could not camp in the house indefinitely, and eventually Doris moved away. According to Taff, the phenomena followed her to at least 2 other homes, though the activity reportedly diminished over time. By the late 1970s, the case had already shifted from an active investigation into a story retold in lectures, articles, and, eventually, a controversial film adaptation titled The Entity. Doris Bither herself never sought the spotlight. She died in the 1990s from natural causes, leaving behind children who still remembered those nights with unease. Some have spoken publicly, others avoid the subject. Skeptical investigators have revisited the case, pointing to Doris's alcoholism, past abuse, and the chaotic home environment as more plausible sources for what happened. Yet the photographs, witness statements, and unexplained measurements remain stubborn fragments of a puzzle no one has fully solved. For the people who lived through it, the impact was not theoretical. Doris's children described years of fear, sleeplessness, and embarrassment. Investigators like Taff and Gaynor have said in interviews that the case shook their assumptions about reality, but also left them frustrated. There was no way to replay the events, no controlled conditions, only memories, testimonies, and a handful of unsettling photographs. In the end, the question at the heart of the Doris Bither case remains painfully simple. Were those nights in Culver City proof of something inhuman, or the manifestation of a mind and family pushed beyond their breaking point for all time? This story is based on real documented reports and eyewitness accounts.